I'm Sister Amy Mohammed from the National Hookup of Black Women. I am so excited today to bring to you one of our first classes, which is our food preservation class. Today we'll be exploring the method of freezing. So, we're going to freeze some potatoes, which is some may say is a very difficult veggie to freeze. But freezing is such a cool preservation method because it preserves flavors and it locks in freshness. So we definitely want that as we try to prepare healthy meals for our families. So we're going to get right into some tips and tricks that's going to give us a successful freezing process. So number one, choose quality products. Choose quality foods. Some people would try to freeze foods just because they're almost expired. No, you want remember what we said, freezing locks in freshness. So me, I'm a baker, so I love frozen fruits because I get more freshness out of the frozen fruits, especially when they're off season. So choose quality foods. The next thing you want to do, you want to store your food, and this is super important. You want to store your food in the proper with the proper tools. So here, everybody knows about freezer bags. However, some people may say, oh, all Ziploc bags are made equal. They are not. This is a regular Ziploc bag. It is much thinner than a freezer bag. A freezer bag is designed with thicker plastic to preserve foods and keep a lot of the moisture from getting into the foods. So you want to choose a thicker freezer bag and make sure that you're freezing with a freezer bag. And one of the ways that you know you're using a freezer bag, it has like the little label on it. I love that. The other thing is, when we're storing or freezing liquids, we want to use we use containers. Now, to be honest, I can store liquids in a freezer bag, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But if you have the rooms in your freezer, you can use these little stackable plastics. Yep, and you can use glass that is made to be in the freezer. Now, the only tip that you need to remember, well, the main thing you need to remember about this is keep at least an inch of space, because liquids, they expand at least 10% more when they're frozen. So in this jar, we go 2 inches of head space. So you want to leave that space for the food to expand. And the same for this container, so that it won't crack or explode. So that's to me, that's one of the very important tips. Choose the proper tools. The next thing, we want to make sure that the freezer is set properly. Now, most freezers, if you look at your inside the freezer, it'll tell you the proper setting from the manufacturer. But one thing that I've researched, and if you set it to 0, and it may say this on your refrigerator, it will give your food a longer, it will preserve your food longer in the freezer. Another thing is, you want to never freeze foods that's super hot. You want to put them in the freezer when it's at room temperature, because when you do this, it takes longer to freeze, and you're kind of taking away from the quality of the food. We want to make sure, especially when we're doing meats, we want to wrap our food very tightly. And we're going to show you, we're not doing meats today, but we're going to show you the proper way to get the air out. Now, I like to use a food saver, but most of us don't have a food saver. So we have to manually get the air out. So we have a couple of techniques that we use for that. And we'll go over that as we go along a little further in the class. But when you're coming to meats, aluminum foil is very good to use. So you individually wrap your meats in aluminum foil, and then you can put them in your freezer bag. Now, one thing about freezing, when we go to these stores like Sam's or Costco's, you may buy bulk foods like meats, bulk meat. So you want to wrap them individually, because the whole process is about or the importance of this class is about preserving food, not wasting. So when you have family, sometimes we take out too much and we're not really ready to use all of that. So we can portion, we can use the smaller bags to do individual portions so we can just grab and go. So we want to make sure we do that. And then we can use parchment paper for our veggies and also our meats if you don't have aluminum foil. And you just use a little parchment paper and wrap it really tightly. And then you're going to put it in here and we're going to get the air out of it. Okay. And the next thing is we want to make sure that your food is really dry. So when you put in wet food in the freezer, what you're doing is kind of inviting a party for moisture to come in and just for freezer burn. You're begging freezer burn to happen. So make sure that your food is dry. And we're going to show you something as we go along in this class of why it's so important to do that and the effects that it has on your food, the quality while it's freezing. You want to, this one, the defrosting. That's us. I think all of us have our little unique ways of how we defrost. Now, safety is also a part of this class. So we want to make sure that our food is safe to consume. Some people will run their foods under hot water. That's not necessarily good. Number one, you're cooking the food. And number two, you're also destroying the quality of the food. So you want to either use cold water, let it sit for 20-30 minutes, and then empty the water in another 20-30 minutes. You can do it in 20-30 minute increments. Most people will say put it in the refrigerator overnight. Who has time to wait overnight for some meat? So most of us, we just put it in some water, but make sure that your water is cold. I have a very cool tip though to share. Aluminum baking sheet. You can take one of these now and just put your meats or whatever you're unthawing on one of these, because this is a great heat conductor. Even though that's cold, this is gonna help your food unthaw at a faster rate. So use one of these next time you try. Okay. And then when we get into freezing fruits, you can't just, let's say veggies. Let's start with veggies. When you get into freezing veggies, you can't just throw veggies in the freezer. Don't do that. You have to do something called blanching. And we're going to go over the importance of blanching and the technique of blanching as we go a little bit further along. Then when you get into fruits, you can just throw them in there, but you don't want to just throw fruits in the bag because they will clump and kind of coagulate and get all like little lumpy. So it's a really cool thing if you can just take your fruits, especially berries. Berries, you really need to do this with berries. You just lay them all individually on a cooking sheet, baking sheet, and you can do what we call flash freezing for about an hour. So you put it in the freezer for an hour and let them become individually frozen, and then you put them in here, and that'll stop the kind of clumping of your fruits. So fruits and veggies and meats, you kind of have to do them a little differently. Okay. And the other thing is, you can't really freeze everything. Some people think you can freeze any kind of food. Stay away from freezing soft cheeses. I froze some cream cheese, and when we took it out, it tasted terrible, and the texture was just horrible. When you're getting into dairies, with the exception of butter, butter freezes well, milk freezes well, but heavy cream, not so good. Any soft cheese, hard cheeses are fine, but when you get into anything with high water content, and this goes for veggies too, like leafy veggies, there's no need to freeze those because you're not going to have a quality product. Okay. Now another thing, some of the herbs, there is a really cool way to freeze herbs. You can do that. You take an ice tray and make little ice cubes, and you can use some olive oil or your favorite cooking oil or some type of fat, and you put your herbs in there, and you can take out those little cubes and put them in soups and sauces as you go. So that is, but once you freeze them in the ice tray, you want to still put them in the bag, because they will become freezer burn if you just leave them in the ice tray and not have them covered or sealed tightly. So that's very important, making sure that we choose something that's going to have a tight seal. That's the important part of having the proper storage containers. Okay. So we said today we were going to talk about doing some potatoes. So potatoes, a lot of people don't like to freeze them because they come out kind of crazy. So we're going to do a couple of things with some potatoes today. We're going to do hash browns, French fries, and we're going to show you some diced potatoes so that you can, you know, add them to your green beans or whatever, your soups and things like that. So let's look at our hash browns. Now, I froze some hash browns just the other day. I labeled them. You always want to label your bags, and that's cool because most of the foods can last in a freezer from 6 months to a year. My advice would be every 3 months rotate your food. Now, you know, if you like my family, we don't have that much frozen, so we pretty much eat what we're trying to buy if it's frozen. But if you have a deep freezer, now a deep freezer, it's even better than the freezer that comes with your refrigerator, because you're constantly opening your refrigerator freezer. So a deep freezer gives you actually can have your product or your food last even longer. So here I used I did some hash browns, and we're going to demonstrate how we did these hash browns. Because you can't just go and shred some potatoes and freeze them. You cannot do that. And we're going to talk about the steps. So I have here, I put 2 blocks of the potatoes for the hash browns, and it's really frozen here. But I have parchment paper separating the two, but I made them into little patties. So what I did is something called blanching. So when you're blanching, basically you're taking a pot and you're gonna bring it to a boiling rolling boil. Now some people will add salt to it. The only reason why they're adding salt to the water is to get it to boil faster, because salt will bring the temperature up at a faster rate. So you put your veggies in some hot boiling water. No more than 4 minutes. 3 to 4 minutes. Anything past that, that's called you pretty much cooked it. So once you do that, you want to take them out and immediately put them into some cold water. And so you want to have a bowl. I like to use glass bowls when I'm doing my, but you can use any kind of bowl. But you want to make sure that it's either, you can do ice in here, or you can do, what I do, I have my water already kind of sitting, because I don't like to go to the store and buy ice, and I don't like, because it get kind of bulky in your freezer, and I don't like using all my ice cubes. So I have these little non-leak freezer packs, and I'll put 2 or 3 in here and let this water get ice cold. Now, to be honest, even though this is the better way to blanch your food, because blanching basically stops the cooking. It's like that's what you're doing. You're shocking your veggie and you're stopping the cooking process. And that's very important as we prepare for freezing. So once you can also just use the cold water under your sink, and it works well just as much. So you're gonna once you boil, and this is with all veggies. Pretty much all of the veggies, especially potatoes. You definitely want to boil them first. Now, before we even get to the boiling, you want to soak them. Get that starch off, because that's what's going to make them cook better. So you have to soak potatoes. And I think most people that cook potatoes know that once you cut them up, most people let them sit in water for 15 to 20 minutes. I like to do that for about 5 minutes longer. So I'll let them sit for 10 minutes at one point, dump that water, put some more fresh cold water on them, let them sit up another 10 minutes, and then I'll go ahead and start my blanching process. And I'll cook them for 4 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, and then I'll go ahead and put them in the ice water. So again, we're doing that for potatoes, but we're also doing it for all of our other veggies. So here's our hash browns. And these hash browns have a lot of water on them because I didn't do a step to make sure, one of the tips that we talked about earlier, which was making sure that your that all your veggies are dry. Now these hash browns, I just kind of I didn't let them dry out. That's the problem. So you see a lot of water. You can see the buildup of water on them. So, but they're still good. They're still going to cook very well. So that's the hash browns. And I did some sliced potatoes. We want to make potato ingrata or something like that. So we would let these defrost. I would probably put them on here and let them defrost. But notice they still have a potato color. Now most of your food will change color in the freezer if you don't blanch them, if you don't treat them properly before freezing them. So you definitely want to do that. And I did some homemade fries. Now most people just I have to say this about potatoes. Potatoes are they're very funny acting. They are. But I like to keep the skin on the potatoes because a lot of nutrients is in the skin. So most of the things that I chop, I did not peel. Some people don't like it. But these are my potatoes. These are my fries. My daughter was my 6-year-old was so excited. She thought we were going to have French fries last night. I said, no, baby. Mommy's prepping. So this is a fry. This is a frozen fry right here. So all I have to do is get ready to put them in a nice pot of hot oil. The thing about getting a nice crispy French fry, and this is going to make a nice crispy French fry, you want to do the blanching process, and that's all I did with this. But if you fry it twice, you get restaurant quality fries. So remember, get the starch off by soaking it 15 to 20 minutes, blanch them, then you boil them for 4 minutes, blanch them in cold water to stop the cooking process, and then we let them dry and we freeze them. That's if we're going to freeze them. But if we want to cook them up right that day, we do the same thing, but we're going to fry them, take them out, and then we're just going to fry them just like we did when we did the 4 minutes. Then we're going to let them dry a little bit and then refry them again, and you'll get a really crispy fry. But and I just gave you some cooking tips. But as far as freezing, this is what we did for our French fries. And I'll show you how to cut these up. Now, I open these and we're going to hurry up and get these back in the freezer because, see, they're losing. They're kind of defrosting as we're speaking. So when you're doing, and I want you to, when I showed you these, they were kind of flat. It's very important to keep your veggies flat if you can, if you're not storing them in a jar or glass. And some things you will store kind of at a higher height, but it's cool to keep them for stacking purposes. And your food has a tendency to just kind of you get a better quality when you do that, when you keep them low. So what I'm gonna do, the enemy to freezing is moisture and mostly moisture. That's the main thing. So we're gonna squeeze all that air out. And here's another unique way that people will do it. Now, rounder veggies, the ones that's harder to lay flat, there's something called the straw method. Now, some people might freak out on this. After you squeeze all this, if you don't have a vacuum sealer, let's do old school. You put that little straw in there, you zip it up as far as you can, leave a little hole, you squeezing it out, and you're just gonna suck that air out. And do it real quick. And you have, I know that's funny, but that's an old school way of doing it. That's called the straw method. So we're going to go ahead and put these back in the freezer. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten them out. See, they're already frozen, but I want to get that air out of them. That's very important for me to get that air out. And I want to show you all how to chop it up a little bit. Now here are some diced potatoes, or chopped potatoes. that we did. But you see the color? The color is there because we blanched them. That's very important. You stop the enzymes. I mean, you have to blanch them, especially if you leave the skin on, because most people think that bacteria won't grow in the freezer. It will, and people can catch the same things they do if you can something the wrong way. You can get that same result if you freeze the wrong way. So you want to make sure that we stop the bacteria, the growth of the bacteria in there. Now, I actually heard a lady say that her food can last 5 years in the freezer. I wouldn't trust that. That's just me. I would not trust it. So here are some strawberries I did in May. I did these strawberries in May. They were fresh. So we know strawberry season is in June. So they were super sweet. So these are what I use to make my strawberry cake. And all I did was get the air out of them. And I put a little, and I probably could have used a smaller bag on this. And I just put some tape on it so that I can have them stacked a little bit better in my freezer. So I'm going to give this to my assistant. She can put them back into the freezer. And we're going to look at some ways to do the hash browns, because with some of the tools that we have. So we got a grater. Now the cool thing about hash browns, even with this big potato, definitely clean and wash your potatoes. I like to put a little soap on mine, wash them on some cool water, scrub them with my little veggie scrubber, and then same thing here. You want to identify, make sure you don't have any divots that or rotten spots. You want to go ahead and cut that off or get rid of that. But you want to take the whole potato. Now this is just for hash browns. Take your whole potato, hot boiling water, boil it for, now this is a little different. You're going to boil it until you can get your knife or fork, not all the way in, just a little bit. So about 10 minutes. 10 minutes is all you have to do. Let's just say that. So you boil the whole potato. Now we're doing hash browns. Boil them for 10 minutes. You let them cool. Let your potatoes cool. You can put them in the refrigerator. Now these have been cooling overnight. I boiled these. It's called Parboil. That's pretty much what I did. So it makes it easier. And so when we do this, when we go ahead and take our grater, and we're going to grate these up. Now you can do this in a food processor to get it even more. Now notice I'm keeping the skin on these. So I'm just going to show you a little example here. Now I would still soak these in some cold water. I would soak these to get some of the starch off of them because I haven't soaked them yet. So even though I've grated them, I'm still going to put them in some water. This cold water here. And look at all that starch there. And we got that over there. Okay. So that's how you do your hash browns. And you can lay them out on your parchment sheet and put them in little patties or sections and have you some already made super good hash browns kind of set to go. Now let's look at our French fries. Now I like to cook, so I'm a little extra when I do it. So I take off the ends because I like a little square. I'm making a nice little square. Just taking all, you see, it's just a little bit. They'll say that's about 1/4 of an inch, but who's measuring around here? Nobody's measuring 1/4 of an inch when they cut. So you want to hold your knives properly. You get some nice, about 1/8 of an inch slices. And this, by taking that off, making that little square, you get a more uniform cut. Now I could cut this a little bit more, but we're going to look at these. See, these are pretty much the same size and it's same shape, and it's going to make it easy for us to make some little fries. So I'm going to cut them in thirds. And if you don't have a mandolin, now look at that. Now you have some nice beautiful fries. Same thing, we're going to soak them for how many minutes? 20 minutes, about as long as this video. So that's that. Now if you want to take your vegetable peeler and do some you want to go ahead and do some, what are we doing, diced potatoes. Uniformity is very important whenever you're cooking. especially when you're prepping food. You want to do uniform food. You want to chop your foods in when I say uniformity, I mean the same size. Again, I don't like taking the skin off. I'm old school, y'all. Y'all gotta understand. I'm old school. So I don't really like taking the skin off, again, because the nutrients are there. And we are going to do diced potatoes here. So you cut them in halves, and then you cut those halves in halves, and you cut those halves in halves, and you have a nice little uniformed product. So you take all that off. This is if you're going to put this in your soups and stuff, you can do that. Now, even if you're going to make French fries, let's say we're going to make French fries, I'll show you. You do the same thing like we were getting ready. You do nice little slices. See? We got these slices. We still got to soak them for how many minutes? At least 20 minutes. So 10 minutes, then dump this water, and then another 10 minutes. I promise you, you won't regret it. So let's dice some. We're going to cut these in half. Now, we're going for uniformity. We cut that in half. And then we just start cutting those into little chunks. And then you have a nice little product. See? Pretty much uniformed. So, and I'm hoping that today's course that you've learned some tips and tricks about freezing, got a little more information about how to freeze and cook potatoes. I wish I could have shown you the full demonstration on the cooking, but it may take a little bit too long. But we are so excited to bring this program to you all. I can't wait to introduce my next class. It's also food preservation. We're going to talk about food dehydration. So thank you so much for joining us today.